In the Back of the Book segment tonight, disgraced Sergeant Bowe Bergdahl faces justice. Bergdahl was held by the Taliban for 5 years after walking off his base in Afghanistan in 2009. Today, he was arraigned before a military judge in Fort Bragg on charges of desertion and misbehavior before the enemy. Joining us now from Washington for the very latest and a look at what happens next, Fox News Chief Intelligence Correspondent Catherine Herridge, and from Virginia Beach, Lieutenant Colonel Tony Schaefer of the London Center for Policy Research. Catherine, bring us up to speed. So Bergdahl goes in front of the judge, and what does he say? What does he hear? What do we know?
Well, basically, he kind of takes the past for the future. He doesn't enter a plea. They're going to meet again in January. And my contacts say what we're going to see over the next few months is that there are going to be some pretrial motions, and then at some point the defense is going to put their finger up in the air, kind of see which way the wind is blowing, and then they're going to try for some kind of deal. A good deal for Bergdahl would be an unauthorized absence. This is a lesser charge, and then commit to 1 year of jail time. The problem with that scenario is that based on our reporting, there is a lot of evidence of premeditation that he intended to leave that outpost permanently.
Sure, I remember he kept a journal. He had a lot of anti-American rhetoric, right?
Yeah, he did. And just recently, one of Bergdahl's squad mates shared a thumb drive with Fox News that Bergdahl had given him 5 days before he left that outpost. And that is the kind of thing you typically do at the end of deployment, not when you're like just a few weeks into it. So that's a sign that he knew he was leaving. And those photos don't really show a guy who is stressed about the leadership situation in the squad, as he now says in that Serial podcast. You see him there with the goats. There's some crazy selfies. There's digging out the outpost itself, and then lots of photos of these feral cats. I don't know why he seemed to be obsessed with feeding the wild cats, but that was the case, and it just doesn't back up his story, Eric.
Yeah, Colonel Schaefer, to you, now, some of this podcast, it seems to be problematic for President Obama. I think he wanted this whole Bergdahl situation to go away. Obama wanted to go on his Hawaiian vacation, but look what happens. He does this Serial, it's called Serial, podcast. He fancies himself as Jason Bourne, the action hero.
Well, I know. I mean, from looking at, you know, those pictures, he's, again, more like SpongeBob than Bourne by a great stretch of the imagination. And let's be clear on this, Eric. The bottom line is that when you start talking about the details, I mean, Eugene Fidel did a great job of rehabilitating him during the Article 32 hearing. The investigating officer, General Dahl, actually almost broke down in tears talking about the hardship of Bergdahl in captivity. And in one single podcast, comparing himself to Bourne, he poked the Army in the eye, and the Army said, whoa, I guess we better move forward with the fact that this guy is not a good character, he's not Jason Bourne, and it's time to basically put him on the course to waking up to the reality of which he faces, which is the fact that if with a general court-martial, he could be seeing some really hard time. And more importantly, Eric, the Army is contemplating, they don't know how far they're going to go. They have hard evidence, hard intelligence showing that this misbehavior before the enemy charge is very much deserved and justified. The question becomes, how much of that will they admit in evidence during the courts-martial? And again, as Catherine said, how much of that will come in during this horse trading session before the actual court-martial starts?
Catherine, is there any, you know, there's been a lot of discussion as to whether or not some military, service people were killed in search of Bowe Bergdahl. Has that come up at all?
Well, that has come up, but based on our reporting, there are real questions about whether you can pin the death or injury of individuals on the search. I mean, it's hard to say. I mean, this is really hostile territory. The issue that really comes home to me is that based on our contacts, this reporting that we did a few months ago about Bergdahl walking off base and then getting captured by gypsies and then being high, one of the military lawyers got in touch with our contact and said, we want to know more about this because we want to make the case that when he walked off the base, it wasn't permanent. He intended to go back at some point, but he simply couldn't because he'd been captured by these gypsies and he was stoned.
Yeah.
I mean that's kind of where things are. I don't mean to make light of this search, and I hope I didn't seem that way.
No,
I know from the guys that this was a really onerous thing to be looking for him. I mean, this is the Wild West in southeast Afghanistan, and this was no small thing to be looking for him when he was already across the border in Pakistan, based on our reporting in about 72 hours.
Colonel, I have a 17-year-old son. The thought of my son at some point looking for someone who walked off his base and had these anti-American comments in his journal makes me crazy. You as a military guy, that's got to make you crazy as well.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, and I know the people who are personally involved in this search, you know, and look, Mike Flynn, we've talked about, Mike was actually a senior intelligence officer overseeing this. Eric, this is no small point. People did die. At least 6 coalition members, U.S. and 3 British, died in the process of doing this. And more importantly, Mike Mullins, the chief of staff of the Pentagon, knew this in December of the year that Bergdahl walked away and told it to President Obama. So what's a real travesty here, despite the fact of this guy walking off, the White House completely tries to gloss over this and basically tries to push this fiction on the American people that Bergdahl is a hero. It completely sickens most people who know exactly what happened. It should never have come down like this.
No, there's no doubt. Catherine, in about 10 seconds or so, I got to think the President Obama over in Hawaii is going, what's next?
Well, I don't know. I mean, I can't put myself in his shoes, but right. I can tell you what the squad commander said to me, which is that they totally agree with this idea that no one should be left behind.
Got to leave it there, Catherine. I'm sorry,
he left
we
them
ran
behind.
out of time. Catherine, Colonel Schaefer, thank you so much.